It has been 2 full weeks since Lynette Hooker vanished. 14 days since that final photograph was taken at 6:34 p.m., right at the Abaco Inn on Elbow Cay. Lynette was poolside afternoon sun still glaring over the Sea of Abaco with plenty of daylight left. 2 weeks since she and Brian took their 8-foot dinghy toward the soulmate. 14 days of grid searches and shifting suspect stories, and a daughter left on the shoreline demanding answers she still lacks. You and I are seeing a massive forensic shift in Hopetown today. Cadaver dogs. Not rescue dogs, not trackers. The kind usually sent into missing person cases early to find someone alive. Not cadaver dogs. Human remains specialists. In my experience, these animals do exactly one thing: sniff out invisible biological trace, evidence no matter the surface or condition, regardless of time passed. Bringing them into Hopetown is absolutely not routine. It is a tactical decision. And grasping what that implies, what these canines actually detect, what their presence on the water and shoreline tells an investigator about this suspect, is vital to understanding why this homicide case just hit its most critical phase. Let's review the case file. For those just joining my briefing, I break down crime scenes like this one with the hard forensic scrutiny they actually require. Stay tuned and follow along closely. I track every single major investigative development as the evidence breaks, and you cannot afford to miss a step here. Leave your own theories below as we work. By the time I finish this briefing, I want your read on something. What does bringing in human remains dogs tell you about where police believe the real answer actually lies? Stick with me. Let us walk through the new evidence, because a lot of these surface-level news reports are missing the critical details I look for. Before we analyze the canine units, you and I need to establish the precise timeline of what happened on the night of April 4th. We must look at clues discovered in the 2 weeks since Lynette vanished. Evidence that blows massive holes in Brian Hooker's official police statement. First up is the photograph. A local fisherman named Joe hit the water that evening to document the ocean conditions for himself. By pure luck, his camera caught what I consider the single most critical piece of documentary evidence in this entire murder investigation. It shows Brian and Lynette Hooker lounging by the Abaco Inn pool. The image carries a digital timestamp, 6:34 p.m. Not 7:30, not near darkness, and definitely not at dusk. 6:34, with bright sunshine hitting the Sea of Abaco, leaving over an hour of solid daylight. Security cameras at the inn caught the couple strolling toward the dock around 6:38. In the evening, Lynette's daughter Carly and her boyfriend Steve verified the tape. The pair absolutely headed for the water at 6:38. But Brian Hooker swore to detectives that they left the inn closer to 7:30 p.m., right as dusk was falling. He claimed the visibility was completely gone, making it impossible to spot Lynette after she went overboard. He blamed rough water and pitch-black skies as the reasons a rescue failed. But 6:34 is miles away from 7:30. To an investigator, that hour gap isn't just trauma playing tricks on your memory. By 6:50 out in the Abacos, during April, local responder Jim Todd, a veteran with the Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue, who knows these waters cold, stated firmly it was glaring daylight. 45 minutes of perfect visibility left. Jim Todd isn't some amateur sleuth online. He is a professional who spent decades pulling bodies from this exact ocean. Todd sat right beside Brian Hooker right after the event. He crossed the Sea of Abaco with the suspect, standing at the bow of the rescue boat while Brian supposedly tried to point out the crime scene. He is one of the rare witnesses who had sustained direct access to Brian during those critical first hours, evaluating his story with the trained eye of a maritime expert. His timeline analysis is damning. If Brian and Lynette departed near 6:38, not 7:30, then the pitch-black conditions Brian described, the sudden darkness losing sight of Lynette in the water completely. The fading light he claimed made saving her impossible simply didn't exist. It wasn't a reality of the weather that night. It was only a feature of his story. I'm not making direct accusations. It's a hard documented conflict between a time-stamped photo surveillance tape and the suspect's statement given to us investigators. Stick with me here. This is exactly the kind of glaring inconsistency detectives are trained to tear apart. The second clue, which never got the spotlight it deserved, involves exactly what Brian told the rescue crews his wife had on that night. When the search teams asked Brian Hooker what his wife was wearing, the moment she slipped into the dark water, a standard but absolutely critical question. Because a victim's clothing completely changes what my guys are scanning for on the water's surface, and all along the muddy shoreline, his answer never wavers across multiple interviews. A black two-piece swimsuit. That is exactly what he fed the search teams. A black two-piece. That suspect description echoed over the radios to every rescuer sweeping the dark water and the jagged coastline. But the photo snapped at 6:34 at the Abaco Inn, the last confirmed shot of her alive, reveals her wearing a light green cover-up over her swimsuit, not a black two-piece, a bright green cover-up, highly visible and incredibly distinctive. It's exactly the kind of clothing search crews desperately need to know about. It completely alters the visual profile they hunt for on pitch-black water and along the shoreline in low visibility. Yet Brian Hooker never once mentioned this green cover-up to Jim Todd. He kept it hidden from everyone on the radio channel dispatching boats and the officers conducting the entire massive search operation. Not even once. When Todd finally uncovered this detail after his first interview, realizing crews had been hunting for a black two-piece instead of a bright green cover-up, his gut feeling about the husband's story turned cold. As a veteran professional, he was blunt. Knowing the victim wore green is absolutely critical evidence. The units were already hunting for green, simply because Brian claimed he threw a green flotation cushion out toward his drowning wife. If they had only known about the actual green fabric on her body, it would have dominated the radio chatter. It should have been his very first sentence. Green clothing floating on ink-black water stands out miles better than a dark black swimsuit. You and I know it changes everything. He stayed silent. The third red flag is the actual geography of the crime scene, and what Todd noticed when he dragged Brian onto the rescue boat the next morning. According to the husband's official statement, Lynette tumbled overboard roughly 150 yards from the shoreline. Their yacht, the Soulmate, sat anchored 1,000 yards away, almost 10 times farther than dry land. Todd's expert analysis of what that geometry means for a panicked victim in the ocean is immediate and crystal clear. A drowning victim doesn't paddle toward a boat 1,000 yards out when dry safe land is just 150 yards in the opposite direction. You swim for the shore. Anyone who's worked homicide near the docks knows this in their bones. It isn't a complex math problem. It's pure primal survival instinct. When Todd physically pointed at sections of the beach, the sand was right there, a mere 150 yards away, plainly visible. He asked Brian point blank if Lynette swam toward the beach or the distant yacht. The suspect couldn't give a straight answer. He dodged using evasive lines like it was confusing and I just can't be sure. Just think about that. The shore was 150 yards away. Treading water. At night in the Abacos, you kick for the nearest land. That's the only sane path. And the husband who supposedly watched his wife struggling in the waves couldn't tell us. The very next morning, under bright sunlight, staring at the actual physical crime scene which way she swam. Failing to cough up a basic directional fact like that. Not during the blinding panic of the night, but hours later in broad daylight, while physically pointing at the sandy shoreline, is exactly the kind of slip-up my fellow detectives log away and never ever forget. Todd also flagged in his report that Brian conveniently left out any mention of drinking that night. The bartender working at the Abaco Inn, identified as Ken, swore Brian was only slightly buzzed. Nowhere near drunk enough to genuinely wreck his spatial awareness and memory. Which means his hazy confusion and sudden inability to lock down basic facts, if even real, came from something much darker than alcohol impairment. And if that confusion was just an act, we're looking at a completely different motive. So what do you and I make of this? We still have to question what Brian actually did the moment his wife supposedly vanished. Let's open the file. Rescue veteran Jim Todd walked me through this with the cold precision of a seasoned pro. The anchor sat untouched inside that dinghy. Tossing it over would have stopped the boat dead. In our line of work, that's step one when someone goes overboard. Plus, 2 life jackets were sitting right there in the vessel. If that green cushion Brian claims he tossed to Lynette missed her in the dark, he had a backup. A second vest. There was the anchor line too, which he could have tethered to himself before diving in to save her. And the shoreline was just 150 yards out. If the water was truly calm enough for Lynette to swim instead of violently fighting the heavy chop, a former United States Marine could swim without breaking sweat. Because Brian Hooker was a Marine. We have a combat-trained suspect physically fit with rescue gear aboard and his wife drowning 150 yards from land. I don't flag these details just to point fingers. I document them because crime scene physics simply demands some hard answers. The lifelines were sitting right there. He ignored them. Todd showed me another massive red flag out on the water. It's a behavioral discrepancy that hints at a motive darker than a tragic mistake. Brian casually mentioned to our team that their main boat, the Soulmate, hadn't touched a marina dock in over 2 years. For 24 months, that vessel lived on a mooring ball or anchor, completely off the grid, totally cut off from shore. 2 years of daily dinghy runs ferrying back to land. That means Lynette drove that skiff constantly. She would be highly capable, deeply familiar with those exact coastal conditions. Todd's professional read on this matches my detective gut. If Lynette was actively driving the dinghy that fatal night, the sea must have been calm. Veteran boaters never hand the wheel to the weaker driver when the weather suddenly turns ugly. You put the strongest, most seasoned operator at the helm when the water gets rough. Brian, placing Lynette in the driver's seat, is an unintentional confession about the weather that evening. And that quiet confession completely destroys his sworn statement that pitch-black darkness and violent waves stopped him from saving her. Either the water was dead calm when she vanished, and his whole story about stormy, brutal chop was a total lie, or the sea was truly lethal. And Brian, as the trained military man, was driving the skiff himself. His official police statement cannot possibly support both versions of reality. This is exactly the kind of deceptive pattern my task force looks for. On their own, you could write these off as the confused memories of a grieving husband. But when every single lie leans the exact same way, when every fractured detail points to one specific chilling truth, showing a calm sea and a highly controllable crime scene, that is when seasoned homicide detectives know they are looking at cold-blooded murder, not a coincidence. Now, you and I need to examine the cadaver dogs. Deploying them in Hopetown changed the entire trajectory of this case. We call them human remains detection canines, or HRD dogs, or simply cadaver dogs. These are not the typical trackers uniformed cops use during the first 48 hours of a search. Those patrol dogs sniff the air hoping to find a beating heart. They operate on a completely different investigative mission. What my cadaver units are bred to hunt is something far darker. The invisible chemical scent of human tissue after a life ends. I consulted Dave Moyer, a master canine handler, who worked with the San Bernardino Sheriff and United States Navy tracking programs. He broke down exactly what these specialized hounds can uncover. Pay close attention to his findings, because the general public vastly underestimates the sheer tracking power of a certified HRD animal. When we deploy them on the water, these dogs balance on the bow, shoving their noses into the breeze while we sweep the search grid. They aren't relying on sight. They hunt volatile organic compounds, the distinct chemical footprint left behind by a rotting human corpse, that float up through the ocean depths and break the surface. Our forensics labs have mapped over 400 unique markers in this death signature. In this job, you learn these compounds are lighter than water drifting upward. Some hitch rides on tiny gas bubbles. Others cling to microscopic biological fragments. Hitting the surface, they form what we in the field call a scent cone. A hidden pillar of chemical data lingering right in that thin pocket of air just above the dark water. Give a certified cadaver dog the right wind conditions, and it catches that grim signature, even if the victim is dozens of feet under. The animal doesn't even need to be floating directly over the actual remains. It just needs to catch the outer edge of that scent cone. When that dog hits, trust me, it is never ambiguous. It's a cold, deliberate signal. We log those coordinates instantly, and then the heavy technical gear takes the lead. Sonar grids sweep the dark seafloor. We always drop an underwater drone first. In waters with brutal currents, no seasoned detective sends human divers into a totally blind situation. The drone verifies. The dive team confirms. Out here in the Sea of Abaco, the environmental nightmares are massive. Shifting, winds blow that scent cone entirely sideways as it pushes through the water column. By the time it finally hits the surface, it could be a massive distance from the actual body resting below. Warm Caribbean waters drastically speed up those dark biological processes compared to freezing northern depths. Decomposition ravages the evidence much faster. That means the scent spreads wider as human material scatters in the current. For an investigator, this creates a brutal operational nightmare. My dogs aren't hunting for one massive isolated hit. They are tracking a ghost, stitching together a pattern of faint signals across several passes to perfectly triangulate the source. Listen. Our forensic method is pure grid work. You run the pattern. You log every single hit, no matter how subtle. We look for that exact intersection of multiple signals across endless passes. These animals make the vast ocean smaller, not by solving it on day one, but by narrowing the crime scene using hard data. Now stick with me here, is the crucial detail the media entirely misunderstood about this murder case, or just missed completely. The dogs, out in Hopetown, aren't just working the deep water, they are sweeping the shoreline. Same team, entirely different forensic mission. A dog out on the water is hunting for a body. But a dog pacing a beach, a dark pathway to the water, a wooden dock piling, or a concrete launch ramp, that animal is hunting for trace evidence. And let me tell you what these specialized dogs uncover on a surface that looks completely spotless to rookie cops is something that completely shatters the forensic picture of this entire murder investigation. It changes everything. Certified detection dogs will alert on biological trace material at microscopic levels, completely invisible to any human eye. They hit on diluted blood that no human sense could ever dream of catching. You and I might walk a beach after 2 weeks of harsh tides and baking sun and see nothing wrong. To us, the sand looks washed ordinary, totally clean. But sand absorbs. Wood grain absorbs. Concrete absorbs too. Those chemical molecules of human trace. Evidence do not just wash out with the evening tide. They never bleach out in the sun. They sit trapped inside porous materials, long after everything looks pristine. In my years on the force, I saw dogs alert on crime scene surfaces that suspects had violently scrubbed, heavily weathered, or even fully painted over years after the fatal event actually happened. That cold chemical signature persists. The dog catches it, not because animals are perfect, no biological system is, but because the underlying chemistry is undeniable, and we train them for very specific compounds. Compounds that simply refuse to wash away just because someone tried to bleach a crime scene. What this means for the Hopetown murder investigation is highly specific and chilling. The entire Elbow Cay shoreline, the docks, the launch ramps, the dark paths leading to the water, the pier, pilings, every single surface involved in the bloody events of April 4th is currently being swept by the most sensitive trace detection tool we investigators have. I'm not talking about some basic chemical spray used by rookie lab techs, but a living, breathing system trained on the exact scent profile of human decay. They work the shorelines with the absolute same cold, disciplined approach our marine teams are using on the water's surface and far below it. Look, the Royal Bahamas Defense Force just confirmed their search grid is currently running across 4 simultaneous layers. Shoreline units water sweeps, aerial drones and submersible ops. Every single layer hits ground, the others just can't reach. A hit on one level paints a target for the next. A cadaver dog flags a surface coordinate. Then a drone scans the bottom geometry right there. If that camera spots something solid, a diver goes down with a hard target. No blind fumbling in the dark. In my experience, this isn't a search losing steam. It's an investigation entering its most technical phase. But there's one specific angle of this operation you and I need to look closely at, because it shows exactly how advanced things are getting. In the waters off Elbow Cay right now. The evening news hasn't fully explained how this really works. Drift modeling. When a body hits the water and vanishes, we detectives rely on specialized software. It tracks the probable path of that person or any evidence moving through the currents over time. The system crunches the numbers on hourly wind direction, surface speeds, shifting tidal cycles, water temps, and the exact drop point as best as we can pin it. You get a probability zone. It's a digital heat map showing exactly where the physical evidence most likely drifted in the hours since the crime. Days pass, weather turns, and that map updates. My old teams wouldn't just drag the same patch of water morning after morning. They chase a living model that tells them where the evidence most likely sits right now, using every piece of data on how the Sea of Abaco flows. Down in the Abaco Sea, those deep water forces create a nightmare scenario that standard open ocean modeling just misses. It's a closed-in basin. Those tidal cuts and jagged channels rip up local currents that can act wild, trapping physical evidence in dead zones, shooting bodies in directions the main tide doesn't follow, or just violently reversing their path entirely during a tidal shift. Evidence washing into an island cut might just spin in circles for days, long before it ever spits out into the main channel. But if a body hits the open water, it can vanish miles away quickly. Our drift models try to account for this chaotic movement. But that basin is a mess. It means our search grids have to be wider, much less exact than they'd be out in calm open ocean. Those warm April water temperatures down in the Abacos add a massive investigative hurdle. I've seen it. Bodies break down aggressively faster in warm Caribbean currents than up north. We aren't just talking about a slight difference either. It changes the whole game. The sheer biological reality of what that water does to a human body left in it for 2 weeks in the Abacos is totally different from a cold water timeline. This directly changes what our cadaver dogs are actually smelling, and how that death scent spreads across the entire search grid. As the biological material breaks apart, that heavy single source of scent a dog hits hard on day one turns into a massive ghost-like field of scattered traces spread across miles of open water. Those dogs aren't hunting for one massive smoking gun hit that clears the case anymore. They are tracking a fading pattern, catching faint whiffs on repeated boat passes that combine. Let us detectives finally triangulate where the actual remains sit. That's why we obsess over grid searches. Dogs working those same patches repeatedly brings in vastly better intel than just one single sweeping look around. The hard data stacks up, a pattern locks in, the ocean shrinks. Now the Coast Guard opening a formal criminal inquiry. That's huge. Stick with me, this changes way more than the label on a file. Slapping a criminal tag on this unlocks heavy legal powers that a standard search and rescue crew simply doesn't have. Subpoenas warrants for phone records, tracking digital metadata, opening direct pipelines to federal law enforcement through overseas attachés. Treaties that let us drop the full weight of a federal murder squad onto forensic evidence pulled straight out of Bahamian jurisdiction. Nassau still runs the main boots on the ground and holds total legal jurisdiction over what happened in their waters. But this Coast Guard angle, that acts as a parallel American shadow investigation, locking down legal ground neither side could ever clear on their own. Let's step into the squad room together. These two investigations feed each other, grabbing crucial evidence the other cannot reach alone. And that coordination, locked in through the official Bahamian request for American assistance, means whatever my guys find on one side instantly drives the other team's active pursuit. We rely on that bilateral extradition treaty between the United States and the Bahamas. Signed in 1990 and active since 1994. It builds the exact legal framework we need to cooperate on major heavy-hitting criminal cases. Right now, that framework is firing in both directions. Whatever this criminal investigation finally exposes, the legal machinery to cross those borders exists, and trust me, it is running. When an official investigation goes quiet, it doesn't mean the case is stalling out. It is the silence of deliberate, airtight operational security. If detectives are talking openly to the press, it means we already made the arrest and the evidence is sitting in a courtroom. When my old colleagues shut their mouths, it means they are guarding crucial evidence, protecting the integrity of the murder case. They are building and keeping our targets completely in the dark. Listen to me. The lack of press releases does not mean a lack of forward investigative progress. It means the real police work is happening below the surface. Literally with those deep underwater search operations, and figuratively in all the forensic and legal digging happening across 2 different international jurisdictions. Brian Hooker was hauled into police custody on April 8th. After 5 grueling days in the interrogation room, with court extensions, he walked free on April 13th, uncharged. His defense lawyers have made it clear and consistent. He completely denies any criminal wrongdoing, claiming he is fully cooperating with my former colleagues, maintaining his presumption of innocence. He told CBS News he would never stop searching for his wife. But he has already packed up and left the Bahamas. Lynette's family stayed behind. Carly flew in with her boyfriend Steve. They sat down with Bahamian detectives. We had them walk the exact route of Lynette's last known movements. Carly has publicly insisted her stepfather's story just does not sit right With her gut? That his details completely clash with how they ran that boat and what she knew her mother was wearing that day. And what a guy with Brian's specific skills would actually do if the emergency was exactly as he claimed. On Saturday, April 18th, exactly 2 weeks after the final confirmed sighting of Lynette alive, a group of strangers gathered out on the Sea of Abaco. They climbed into a small boat. They spoke a few quiet words, tossing flowers into the dark waves as a tribute to a woman who should have been home for Easter. They did not broadcast what they were doing. They were not looking for any recognition. They just did it because she deserved it. Jim Todd, one of the first searchers out on the water looking for Lynette, told me exactly what that silent tribute meant to the tight-knit Elbow Cay community. He said this missing stranger had morphed into their own sister, their own mother, their own daughter. That psychological connection was not personal. It was purely human. A woman had vanished into these depths. And the locals working these waters felt that chilling absence so deeply, it pushed them to respond in total silence, completely without cameras, just dropping petals on the sea. That is exactly what Lynette Hooker represents to the people of Elbow Cay today. She is not a cold case file or a viral topic. She is a deeply felt absence. Leaving a daughter, standing on the very ground. She was last seen hunting for hard answers. My badge hasn't delivered yet. Whose grieving mother flew to the Bahamas, helping my former colleagues process text messages sent directly between her and Lynette. A mother reading her daughter's final texts, helping us build this homicide case. But stick with me here, this investigation is highly active. It is not losing steam. That heavy official quiet from law enforcement. It isn't silence. It is the strict operational security of a case where detectives are guarding evidence building toward a massive break they just aren't ready to drop publicly. I'll tell you this. Cases where the brass talks openly are cases where handcuffs are already on, and the forensic evidence is sitting in court. The cases that go completely dark, those are the ones where my guys are still quietly hunting the suspects and the hard evidence needed for criminal charges. The precinct doors are locked, and that case file is growing. You and I know crime scenes talk. Any chemical signature from April 4th, if it buried itself in that sand, or seeped into the wood of a dock, piling anywhere along that shoreline, won't stay hidden from the forensic teams now touching down in Hopetown. It just waits for us. That anchor, those life jackets, the tiller, the lanyard, even that green cover-up conveniently left out of the initial police reports. The timeline discrepancy throwing off that departure by nearly a full hour. A husband who cannot even tell investigators which way his wife swam when she was 150 yards out. Every single inconsistency is a thread. Those cadaver dogs working the coastline are hunting for a biological truth that doesn't rely on anybody's alibi. Evidence that never misremembers and certainly never changes its story. It stays right where it bled out, locked in whatever, soaked it up, just waiting for a good detective to find it. The hounds are on it. If you hold any missing puzzle piece regarding Lynette Hooker disappearing, make the call to the Royal Bahamas Police Force or the U.S. Coast Guard immediately. Right now, nobody faces formal charges for what happened to Lynette. And as any good cop knows, everyone mentioned remains innocent until proven guilty in a courtroom. My case file here relies on verified reporting, sworn official statements, and hard facts pulled from ABC News, CBS, CNN, alongside direct testimonies from Hopetown Rescue's Jim Todd and canine handler Dave Moyer. I am laying out facts here, not making legal accusations. If you and I share a need to solve this, if you respect cold hard evidence tracking wherever the truth leads, then join this channel right now and make sure you hit that bell. I will track every lead that drops. Hit the like button and share this case file. The more eyes we get on Lynette, the harder it is for the real investigation to stall. Put your theories down below. Tell me, what does putting scent dogs on that exact beach say about where detectives think this is heading? How do you read that broken timeline? Or the husband suddenly forgetting a green cover-up? I review every single comment because in a cold case like this, our scrutiny keeps the heat on. Lynette Hooker demands justice. Her family deserves the absolute truth. And the physical evidence, whether floating out there, washed ashore, or soaked into dockwood, fighting 2 solid weeks of saltwater tides, is finally going to be dragged into the light. This is about reopening the tragic files that demand our full attention.